kasalukuyang nagpi-privilege speech si Senador Juan Ponce Enrile. Panoorin po natin.
However, the Blue Ribbon hearing was turned, surprisingly, into a time and an occasion to attack, malign, and assassinate the character of persons, especially me, who refrained from attending that hearing so that the witnesses and the resource persons would be able to talk freely without any kind of undue restraint. The hearing was dismally converted into a farcical and unjust hearing instead of being the sober forum publicized boastfully as the arena to bring out the truth and nothing but the truth. I have been advised by well-meaning friends to ignore what was said against me in that Blue Ribbon hearing. After all, according to them, the abusive words were from a cuckoo, an inane and bitterly hostile mind. I pondered over their unsolicited counsel and appreciated their concern for me. However, I decided to break my silence, lest those who heard the vicious and baseless accusations against me of that vile and malicious mind would believe them to be the truth and nothing but the truth. Today, therefore, I rise in this chamber on a matter of personal privilege to defend my personal honor, the honor of my family, the honor of my office, and the honor of those millions of our countrymen who trusted me and voted me to this Senate. I will soon retire from politics after 2.5 years more of public service, and I owe it to the current generation, Mr. President, to answer the barefaced lies said against me and my office, although deep in my heart, I believe that history, in a calmer and kinder social climate, will absolve me. I would have wanted to deliver this privileged speech earlier, but I deliberately postponed it until today out of respect and compassion to the hapless victims of Super Typhoon Yolanda that wrought unexpected, unimaginable, and widespread destruction, havoc, misery, and deaths to our suffering countrymen in the Visayan provinces of our republic, and also out of deference to the time-honored practice in this chamber that we give all utmost priority to the general appropriation bill when it is being deliberated upon in plenary. In that Blue Ribbon hearing, in the press conference that followed it, and later on in the media, a member of the Senate, without any iota of concrete proof, brazenly accused me, among other things, of being murderous, of going to the restroom with bodyguard armed with a long firearm, and of being the mastermind or brain of the alleged PDAF scandal. Mr. President, I know that I should not dignify with answers these obvious lies flowing as they did from the hallucinated imaginings of a spiteful and bitterly hostile mind. But I must debunk these unbridled lies from the records of the Senate for the sake of honest truth. First, that I was murderous. Mr. President, I never murdered anyone during all my almost 90 years on this planet. I was in the war during World War II as a freedom fighter. I fired bullets against the foreign invaders of our country as they fired bullets at me. I do not know if I hit any of those I shot at. But for someone to say with impunity that I killed someone deliberately, I do not know if there are any who did in the Senate. That I'm planning anyone's murder is the grandmama of all falsehood fabricators. Second, that I go to the restroom of the Senate with bodyguard armed with a long firearm. Mr. President, I never realized until that Blue Ribbon hearing that we have a peeping Tom in the Senate. I never knew that someone was keeping an eye on me. Even when I go to the most private of places here in this building. It was, after all, supposed to be a private area. I'm sure, Mr. President, everyone in the Senate, including the fabricator of that falsehood, knows that what she said was a bold-faced lie. Since 1987, when I first joined the Senate, I never allowed my security men to carry any firearm in the Senate. Even the members of the Senate Security Force, I know that none of them was ever allowed to carry long firearms in the Senate area. Mr. President, perhaps my obsessive hater is the only one in all these years ever so blessed to see someone carrying a long one in the Senate, especially in our restroom. Modesty aside, Mr. President, early in my youth, I was trained in the native martial art of Arnis. Later on, I earned a black belt in the Korean martial art of Taekwondo. Hence, I do not need a firearm long or short to defend myself in a face-to-face combat. Besides, unlike some persons familiar to me, I do not think I suffer from any kind of schizophrenic or psychotic paranoia, to be that paranoid to need someone with a firearm to visit a restroom, especially in the Senate. True, one of my men normally goes with me to the restroom, but he carries no weapon. He only goes with me to assist me because of my impaired vision. Maybe what my obsessive hater mistook for a long firearm, Mr. President, was a tiny gadget that I bring with me to scratch my back when it itches and to strike a mischievous fly, langaw, when I encounter one along the way. Mr. President, I've traveled all these years in daytime and in nighttime everywhere without fear of being harmed. I know that I had not done any kind of oppressive act by word or by deed against anyone to earn that degree of enmity that would provoke a desire to harm me or to take my life. This is another thing that demonstrates the obvious falsity of the claim that even in the Senate, I need a bodyguard with a long firearm. Only a distorted, degraded, and deranged mind could imagine and invent such a blatant lie. Third, that I was the mastermind or brain of the alleged PDAF scandal. Mr. President, only an inane and bitterly hostile mind could fabricate such a canard. Again, all I can say is that this is an outright lie, and this is just another of those baseless fabrications against me from a depraved mind. I will not belabor, Mr. President, this unfounded canard. I'm aware that the public has been waiting for me to speak up on this matter. But for now, suffice it to say that there will be a time and a more auspicious, appropriate forum to deal in detail with the alleged PDAF scam. And I will give my fullest cooperation to unearth the truth in this alleged scandal. Perhaps my obsessive haters should appear as a special prosecutor against me to demonstrate to her admirers her knowledge of the facts of the alleged PDAF scandal and her legal skill as a trial lawyer. I'm sure that she will experience something that she never experienced before. Whenever an occasion arises, my bitter and obsessive hater habitually flaunts her being a former judge. With a flair of self-praise, she would normally say, and I quote her, as a former judge, etc., unquote. Well, I'm sorry to say, Mr. President, that this former judge does not seem to understand the basic meaning of due process. Every law student, whatever the level of acumen he has, knows that due process simply means you hear first the evidence before you condemn. Now I know why she nearly flunked her bar examination. A parrot, Mr. President, can memorize legal principles, but it cannot apply them. It seems, Mr. President, that the inanities of my bitter and obsessive hater are boundless. Ito, Ginoong Pangulo, ay sapagkat nung kasagsagan ng barilan sa Zamboanga City, sa pagitan ng mga sundalo natin at ng mga armadong tauhan daw ni Nur Miswari, sinabi ng senadora na ako daw ang nagudyok sa barilan sa Zamboanga City at nagbigay daw ako kay Nur Miswari ng 40 milyong piso upang guluhin niya ang Zamboanga City. Naku po, sobra naman ang senadorang yan. Kung hindi ba naman naninira sa kapwa, nasa probinsya po ako ng Cagayan noong nangyari ang gulo sa Zamboanga City. Wala akong kamalay-malay na may barilan pala sa Zamboanga City. Nahalaman ko na lamang iyong pangyayari doon, na barilan sa Zamboanga City nung bumalik na ako dito sa Maynila. Paano ako mapapasama, Ginoong Presidente, sa isang pangyayari na wala akong kaalam-alam? Maliwanag po ito na walang kaduda-duda na nagpapatunay na may pagkasinungaling ang senadora na yan. Ang masakap po, Ginoong Pangulo, dinadaan niya sa pagpapatawa sa kanyang mga popular pick-up lines, ang kanyang panluloko sa mga inosenteng kababayan natin. At ang mas masaklap pa ay kung anuman ang mga salitang kanyang binitiwan ay kinakagat ng ilang mga periodista. Nang ganun-ganun na lamang, sinasakyan ang kanyang mga paratang para lamang tuluyang akong idiin dito sa issue ng PDAF. But why is this senator, Mr. President, so obsessive and bitter against me. Many, especially my friends and followers, have repeatedly asked me this question. Mr. President, I do not know for certain the answer to this nagging question. I too am puzzled. I know of no harm that I did to her to arouse her vile anger and hostility against me. Sinabi ng senadora sa Blue Ribbon hearing na ako daw ay may asim pa. May asim pa. Ginong Pangulo, nagpapasalamat ako sa kanya, sa kanyang sinabi na ako ay may asim pa. Ngunit, Ginong Pangulo, ikinalulungkot kong sabihin at masakit mang banggitin. Hindi po ako naaasiman sa kanya. But levity aside, Mr. President, I know what I know is that after her graduation from UP College of Law and her bar examination, I hired her in 1969 to work for me in the Department of Justice, where I was then the Secretary of Justice. When she got married, she asked me and my wife to be her wedding sponsor. When President Marcos transferred me from the Department of Justice to the Department of National Defense on February 10, 1970, my association with her ended until we became colleagues again here in the Senate for the first time in 1995 under the 10th Congress. I can only surmise, Mr. President, that her deep-seated animosity against me arose from two events. One was when I opposed her confirmation as Secretary of Agrarian Reform during the administration of President Corazon C. Aquino. Another was when I refused to include her in the majority bloc when I was elected Senate President in November 2008 and again in July 2010. During the hearing of the Commission on Appointments on her confirmation as Secretary of Agrarian Reform, testing the suitability and qualification of the nominee then, the distinguished senator of the Republic now, I asked her if she was ever under the care of a psychiatrist. Tinanong ko po kung siya ay nagkonsulta sa mga tinatawag na mga mediko na psychiatrist. Yung po mga gumagamot sa mga sakit ng utak. She admitted that she was. She said that she was treated by a psychiatrist at the Makati Medical Center. In that same Commission on Appointments Committee deliberation, I asked her also what grades she got in her bar examination. Tinanong ko po sa kanya, kayo po ay tinatawag na cum laude sa Universidad ng Pilipinas. Ano po ba ang nakuha niyong grado sa inyong bar examination? She replied, Mr. President, that she got a grade of 76. 76% po ang kanyang grado sa bar examination. That meant that she obtained low grades in all her bar subjects. And I remember natatandaan ko po, I remember that she got a grade of 56 in ethics. The easiest bar examination subject. 56% po sa ethics. Kaya intindihan ko na kung bakit hindi niya sinusunod ng mga rules of ethics sa aming profesyon. In that same commission on appointment committee deliberation, I asked her about a white Toyota Celica sports car that the nominee then was said to be driving as her personal car when she was a judge in Quezon City. Toots Trinidad, a former PNB vice president, owned that sports car. He shipped it back to the Philippines upon his return from the United States after his surgical operation for a brain tumor at the Stanford University. That sports car disappeared from the compound of the Bureau of Customs when it arrived in the port of Manila. Toots Trinidad learned that his sports car was with a judge of Quezon City. Toots Trinidad asked then Judge Miriam Defensor Santiago to give the car back to him. She refused. Tinanggihan po na niya na ibalik yung kotse ng pobreng isang naging vice-presidente ng Bangko Nasyonal ng Pilipinas. I was told that she claimed that her husband, Narciso Yap Santiago of the province of Tarlac, who was at that time employed in the Bureau of Customs, gave her that sports car as a birthday gift. Sabi daw niya, hindi ko binigay sa akin ng asawa ko ito na regalo sa aking birthday. Later on, I found out that the car was registered in her name in the Bureau of Land Transportation in the province of Tarlac. Hindi ko po alam kung ibinalik niya yung white Toyota Celica sports car. Ang ating dating Justice of the Supreme Court, naging dekano ng Universidad ng College of Law ng University of the Philippines at naging Secretary of Justice si Vicente Abad Santos, pinayuhan siya na ibalik na yung kotse. Pero ayaw niyang ibalik yung kotse ng pobreng tao na bumili noon sa kanyang paninirahan sa Amerika. As a consequence of my opposition, and among other concerns taken into consideration, the Committee on Agrarian Reform of the Commission on Appointments voted to reject her appointment as Secretary of Agrarian Reform. When I became Senate President in November 2008, she did not vote for me. I tried to reach her before I was voted the Senate President. She refused to answer my phone calls. She even denied my request for just 5 minutes, Mr. President, to see her at her residence. Initially, she was not a part of the new majority then, and consequently, she was not assigned any committee to chair. Eventually, however, I relented and assigned to her 2 major committees upon the intervention of then Senator Mar Rojas. Mga buhay pa po itong mga tao nito at palagay ko ay papatunayan nila itong sinasabi ko. After the election in 2010, I was re-elected Senate President. I did not make an effort to reach out to her to get her support. But it was then Senator Manuel Villar who interceded for her. At that point, she was already allied with the Nacionalista Party of Senator Villar. Senator Villar arranged a dinner in a Japanese restaurant at the Makati Shangri-La Hotel. He pleaded with me to join him and the senator with her husband in that dinner. Senator Tito Soto, who is here, and Senator Gregorio Onasan, who is also here, were also present in that dinner meeting. During the dinner, the senadora and her husband profusely made their amends to me. Because of Manny Villar, Tito Soto, and Greg Onasan, I accepted her and her husband's insincere apologies and took her into the new majority. As a consequence, I assigned to her the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Laws, the only remaining unassigned committee at that time. She wanted to retain her former committees. One was the Committee on Foreign Affairs, which has an oversight committee with a separate and large budget. And second, the Committee on Energy, which also has an oversight committee with an equally separate and large budget. Obviously, she wanted a large pile of money at her disposal. But I could not satisfy her desire because the two committees had already been assigned to two equally capable senators. The Foreign Affairs went to Senator Loren Legarda, and the Committee on Energy went to Senator Serge Osmeña. Finally, she asked for an oversight committee. She asked me for an oversight committee with a separate budget to be specially created for her to support her large staff. I accommodated her request without much ado. Evidently, Mr. President, all those things that I did for her were not enough to assuage her deep-seated and bitter hostility and hatred against me for what happened in the past, especially in her confirmation hearing as Secretary of Agrarian Reform. Mr. President, what I said in this speech is the naked truth and nothing but the truth. No fabrication and no invention in it. I wish to put these remarks in the official record of this Senate for posterity to read. Someday, perhaps, our people will eventually unmask who was lying and who was telling the truth. Finally, Mr. President, then Senator Pamphilo Lacson, called my bitter and obsessive hater, quote, a crusading crook, unquote. Those are not my words. They are the words of Senator Pamphilo Lacson, and I think everyone here knows Senator Pamphilo Lacson. A crusading crook. I have yet, Mr. President, to hear from her a bristling rebuttal, a relevant answer, or a lucid explanation, not ad hominem, as she is wont to do. Up to now, the words of Senator Lacson remained unanswered. They are met with deafening silence from her. And I just wonder why, Mr. President. Anyway, this is all, Mr. President. Thank you for your patience and forbearance and for allowing this representation to use a bit of the time, the Senate's time, to say my piece. Thank you very much.
Majority Leader.
Ang inyo pong napanood ay ang privilege speech ni Senador Juan Ponce Enrile kung saan isa-isa niyang sinagot ang mga alegasyon kaugnay sa pork barrel scam. Inireklamo niya ang umano'y mga walang basihang akusasyon ng ilang miyembro ng Senate Blue Ribbon Committee laban sa kanya sa nakaraang pagdinig ng Senado sa pork barrel scam.
Sa nasabing pagdinig, matatanda ang hinimok ni Senadora Miriam Defensor Santiago si Janet Lim Napoles na kumantan at ituro kung sino ang totoong mastermind ng pork barrel scam. Paniwala ni Santiago, walang kakayanan na magpasimuno ng ganito kalawak na operasyon si Napoles. Pero nanindigan si Enrile na puro kasinungalingan ang mga alegasyon laban sa kanya ni Senador Santiago.
Hindi raw siya ang utak sa 10 billion peso pork barrel scam. Hindi rin daw siya mamamatay tao. Hindi rin daw totoong binabantayan pa siya ng kanya mga bodyguard na may mga long firearms sa loob ng comfort room tulad ng sinabi raw ni Senador Santiago. Ayon pa kay Enrile, wala raw alam sa due process si Santiago na dating judge. Tinawagan po ng GMA News ang kampo ni Senadora Miriam Defensor Santiago pero tumanggi muna siyang magbigay ng kanyang panig.
Bukas na raw siya magbibigay ng statement.